not talking about what we're going to do on the show, you know?
Nice.
Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of FraudFocus with Cambria. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's a Friday.
It really is. And this is my last meeting of the day.
Same.
Technically, like, it's a meeting, I guess, even though it's my own personal meeting. But here we are. So a couple of things have happened. We wanted to do an episode where we actually focus on fraud. Even though I really liked our last episode, I got multiple messages from people that said that they were very impacted by it. So I guess that means we did good, right?
I hope so. I think it can go a long way to talk about the things. I mean, even though it wasn't focused on fraud necessarily, like we're all still human. So I think it was a good thing for us to do. And I felt really good doing it. So I'm glad to hear that it's been well received.
It was a form of therapy for me too, and I did
Hmm.
think back on it a lot over the week and some of the things that we talked about. As I went through stressful situations during the week, I kept thinking back and being reminded about what we talked about, and I would say it was helpful for me personally.
Good. Same, honestly.
Excellent. So, I wanted to kick off this one. We're going to talk about friendly fraud today, and some of our opinions about it, and some of the numbers that are happening in the industry. I'm gonna rattle off some of the numbers, but then I want you and I to talk about our personal experiences with it and our personal opinions about it, and that's just what it is. It's going to be our personal opinions. But that being said, I think that the news that broke this week about the national public data breach is something that just at the top of the show, I wanted to address real quick. So are you super familiar with it? Did you see any of that happening this week?
Yeah. I've been like loosely following it. I know I mentioned this on our last episode, but I do spend a lot of time on Twitter. And the way that my news appears on my feed on Twitter is very filtered through the lens of like the things I engage with on the Twitter machine or the X machine or whatever you want to
X.
call it, which is not in any way business or like career related. So it's very like real world, I think. So like real, like normal people talking about it and making jokes about it and things like that. So that's most of what I've seen about it. But I also, my husband asked me about it just the other day and I looked it up and explained it to him and kind of the implications from my
Yeah.
perspective and what he could do potentially to, avoid being impacted by it, et cetera. So,
That's funny. Okay, so my neighbor Lewis called me yesterday while I was cooking dinner,
mhm.
and he's like, "What is this? What does this mean?" He's like, "Tell me what this means." And then he was reading off some text messages because his family, his parents, had already messaged him about their concern
Mm,
for not only him and his wife but their children as well, and what this means. So I want to just do a real quick rundown about what it is for people that know, and then I'll point some people in some directions. I'll rattle off a couple of things that some other people have mentioned about it. And then Brian Krebs from Krebs on Security did an excellent write up that was published last night. We're recording this on Friday, August 16th. He posted it last night, the 15th. By the time this episode comes out, he might even have more information. But I encourage everybody to seek out his article because not only does it really do a really good job of the deep dive about what happened, but also some suggestions, which some of them were the ones that I told Lewis. So basically, what happened is on April 7th on Breach Forums, there was 4 terabytes of data that was published for sale, uh, claiming to be 2.9 billion rows.
mhm,
Now, this is distinct; it's rows, not records. Rows. So just a giant, basically, database of data.
mhm,
They say it was taken from a company called nationalpublicdata.com, which is a
mhm,
background check company out of Florida
mhm,
that is actually owned by a former police officer.
mm,
Uh, background check companies are pretty common. So are like people search database companies, True
sure.
People Search, Free People Search, Spokio. Those are the ones that everybody knows. So they had some samples of the data. It showed name, address, phone numbers, and social security numbers, which is the big one I think that most people
Yeah,
are freaked out about. And they wanted $3.5 million, which that'd be great money for stealing some data, but also doesn't seem like a lot of money for how much data they claim to
right. Yeah.
So it kind of was under the radar. Now, Brian Krebs has a very nice timeline about this, but
Mhm,
basically on August 12th is like when the news finally picked up that 2.9 billion records were out and about in the world. And they finally admitted that they had this breach. So several months had gone by. Um, I believe the data had been attempted to be sold multiple times,
mhm,
and it had changed hands multiple times. But there's a couple. a company called Have I Been Owned, not Have I Been Pwned. I believe they might be related. I don't know.
Mhm.
But a person named Troy Hunt from that company kind of did a deep dive into what's actually in this data.
Mhm.
Found to be 137 million unique emails. None of those emails included social security numbers. Um, and then also 70 million rows of criminal records.
Mm.
So there's just some numbers we're rattling off here.
Mhm.
There also was uh, the big nut that I think everybody's most going to be most concerned about is 272 million rows of data that does include social security number, most of them with name and home address. However, only 26% of those include phone number.
Mm.
So, I mean, still social security number and home address, I could probably find manually most people's phone number if I really wanted to using
Mhm.
the records that are out there.
Mhm.
Um, they sound so that for younger people, for the Gen Z that might be listening to this, which is going to be like 0 people. Uh, um, they spot checked about 5,000, and most of the people seem to be born before January 1st, 2002. So anybody 22 years old probably going to be fine. You're probably not included in this. Um, most of the records are people over 70, and a large chunk of them appear to be dead, with 2 million of them appearing to be people that would be 120. Now, I'm
Hide
a
your
big
grandma.
fan. Yeah, hide your grandma. But I'm a big fan of wanting to live forever. So hopefully I'll be able to achieve 120 with modern science. But we will see. So all of that being said, there's a lot of data in there. And I would say if you go to Have I Been Pwned, most likely your data's been breached before. So it's already out there.
Mhm.
But anytime these things happen, everybody wants to know, well, what can I do? And it's the same thing I tell everybody. Number one thing you could do for your whole life protection from identity theft is freezing your credit. There's 3 credit bureaus: Equifax, TransUnion, and Experian.
Mhm.
And you go to their, if you just Google that name of that company and credit freeze,
Yep.
and make sure you go to their actual website, not some third party. Go on there, go through the process, freeze your credit. You should not have your credit unfrozen unless you're going to buy a house, buy new furniture and you need credit, apply for a new credit card, or buy a new car. And in
Exactly.
those moments is the only time. Other than that, your credit should be frozen. Just on a regular Tuesday afternoon when you're going to the bar, credit should be frozen.
Mhm.
And it doesn't affect your ability to swipe a credit card that you already have. It affects the ability to open new accounts. So do that. It's free and it's easy. Do you have what's your number one you tell people?
Same thing. Freeze your credit, and then number one, freeze your credit. It's really easy to do, and it's like I think at a federal level, it's required to be free. So if you like Google it as Jordan described, and go to a website and somebody's trying to charge you for it, you're not doing the right thing. So make sure, like Jordan said, go to the actual like web page for the major credit bureaus. If you Google credit freeze, you should actually get a hyperlink to the page that's necessary. The second thing would be to use like one of those free credit monitoring services,
Yeah.
like a Credit Karma or like Experian has one. Your actual bank probably has one as well, so that you get notifications whenever any accounts are opened up. And if you're, maintaining like credit hygiene, I will, and freezing your credit when you're not opening accounts, there shouldn't be anything that pops up. But it gives you the ability to be a little bit more proactive if something
Yeah.
does happen if you haven't frozen your credit.
Yeah. And then real quick, there's a couple other things that you could do. Stop replying to these text messages
No,
that come to your phone. Like, look, we're all getting them right now. It's a random one that says, "Hey, you up?" or "This is so and so. We met last night," and they are trying to bait you into
let me
saying,
see if
"Oh,
I
you
have
got the
one
wrong
from
number."
like this week.
I get like 4 or 5 a day now.
Yeah.
Especially because I'm going through this refi on my house. So
Oh,
like everybody
sure.
knows like there's like these files that I'm getting so many like letters. But like if you don't know the person and it even is it's clearly a wrong number, they're trying to act like it. They're trying to bait you into
Exactly.
doing some sort of action. Job scams are the same right now. Just stop replying to any and all text messages, all of them. Report as junk, delete it. You do not need to reply. If you don't know them, don't reply. Same thing with phone calls. If you don't know it, just don't answer.
Yep.
No, your brother's not in jail and you got to go get $5,000 of Google gift cards to get him out. No, it's not happening. Stop replying, stop answering. And then, real quick, last thing is the fraud guy, Pete Taylor on LinkedIn.
Mhm.
He talked about it today too. It is Friday. He put this up. He says internet providers will not phone you and ask you to install software on your device. No, they're not. You don't have any sort of malware on your computer that Microsoft has called you. stop answering the phone again.
Mhm.
Your bank will not phone you to tell you to move money to a new account, into a safe account, because your account's been compromised. Never going to happen. Just not going to happen. So stop taking actions. And then the police are not going to tell you, like I just said, that like there's some sort of operation that you're helping them out with to catch fraudsters. We do this for a living. We know how like these law enforcement engagements do come through. They come through formal channels. They have paperwork with them. Like they're not just calling people randomly on a Friday night saying we need your help to catch this guy.
Yep.
Not going to happen. So
Yep.
basically, stop answering phones, freeze your credit, everybody. You're going to
Yep.
be fine.
I wanted to add, like, some real world examples, I think, for, like,
Yeah.
kinda it's, like, almost phishing. It's the result of a phishing scam, I think. But you'll get, like, an email or a text message from something that looks like your PayPal or your
Yep.
Chase account or something, and they'll say, "Hey, was this transaction yours? Click this link to verify."
Yep. Straight
And,
up.
like,
Yeah.
don't, ever. They will never ask you to click on a, like, weird looking hyperlink. They'll never ask you to confirm your own bank account information. They are your bank, they should know that. They're your payment service provider, they should know that. And if you do have a question and it's an email, for example, if there's a phone number listed in an email that you are super unsure about, like, you got a thing like, "Hey, uh, my husband, for example, got like this was 6 months ago, but I can imagine that there's gonna be an increase in this type of activity again pretty soon. He got an email from a money transfer company that said,
Yeah.
"Hey, did you authorize this purchase for like $600 to buy
They
crypto?"
try to
And he
freak
was
you
like,
out. Fear.
"No?
Yep.
Okay." And I was like, "Oh, call that, money transfer company's number."
Not the
Not
one from the email.
Yeah, but
Not
I
the one
didn't
from the
think
email.
about that, and so he did call the one in the email. So I wanna, like, word to the wise, I suppose, and now this is something that I make sure to clarify whenever people are asking me about it. If you're going to call, like, look up that provider's or, like, that business, that company's, that bank's actual phone number, and don't ever call the one that's listed in the email, even if you're, like, 100% sure that it's from your bank, just in case, because there is a small chance that it's been it's
Yeah, the whole
actually
thing.
going to be somebody who wants you to download something onto your phone and, like, so they can scrub all of your data while you're logging into your accounts. So
Yeah, and 2 more things about that too. Um, so also incoming calls could be spoofed, so it
Mhm.
could look like your bank. It could say Chase Bank on your phone.
Yep.
It's just don't answer, call it back. Call it like go back onto you. So and also when you're Googling, if you're not using an ad blocker, be careful because fraudsters will buy sponsored ads to try and pretend to be the bank. And
Mhm.
that'll be like the first Google search.
Mhm.
So make sure you're going to your actual chase.com and then calling them back
Mhm.
and all that sort of stuff. So yeah. Cool.
Something I'll say is I think a lot of banks have gotten like, there's kind of been a shift where financial institutions and financial services companies especially are getting a lot better about, like, proactively trying to educate you as their
Yeah.
customer on how they'll contact you, what to expect, what's normal, so that when you do get one of those weird messages, you're like, "Oh, I don't think this is something that they said that they would do, with me as their customer." So I think that that's been a good shift in the right direction, but again, we're gonna see an uptick in it, like, almost
Yeah.
certainly in the next few months, so
And, I would get those emails too. And some of it, I'll talk about some of those things actually in the next section when we talk about friendly
awesome.
fraud. Um, and my opinions about some of those emails and some of the actions that people take after those emails. So, all of that being said, let's talk friendly fraud, shall we?
Let's do it.
So, friendly fraud, first party fraud. What does it mean to you? You tell me.
As a a fraud professional, a fraud fighter, I feel like that's such a loaded question because it's like it's still stealing, right? Like people, like every day, people
Yeah.
who wouldn't consider themselves criminals are taking advantage of various policies or systems or people they know to save money, essentially. But like from the business's perspective and like me as somebody who works for a vendor, like we're helping businesses prevent that kind of behavior.
Hmm.
So I would say that there are definitely scenarios in which it can be insidious. Like I have seen an uptick in what I would call like fraud as a service. For example,
Yeah.
where people are like offering this like exploitation of like return policies or refund policies. They'll put a listing on Facebook Marketplace for like a really like limited edition item or something that's really expensive and say I can get it for you for $50, and then they're like performing this like first party fraud or friendly fraud behavior, whether it's an INR claim or a damaged goods claim or doing a fake return or something like that. And they're like making money off of that because then no one actually paid for it, but they still made the $50 for being
Yeah.
like the one who did it for them. So I don't think it's always like nefarious or insidious, but it is still
So
stealing at the end
it
of
is.
the day.
And that's where I think like let's take a step back to the old days. So friendly fraud, first party fraud is when a consumer willingly participates in the transaction and claims it's fraud.
Yep.
I think that we are all, hopefully anybody that's listening to this is aware, like that's what the foundation of this is. Now, if we if we go even further back, 2015. So some of us OGs that have been in this industry for longer than 10 years understand that when EMV chip cards were coming to the US, we predicted that all of the fraud was going to move online. And that's
Mhm.
been mostly true. Um, mostly true because it became harder to use a fake card at brick and mortar. Now there's still places that do swipe fallback, all of those sorts of things, but it just became harder. So the opportunity moved to the internet. Now, before 3D Secure,
Mm.
which the US still doesn't have wide adoption of, um, it could still open those charges. Like basically 3D Secure shifts the liability to the issuer, but there's some sort of authentication, whether that be in the background happening on 2.2s or whether that be some sort of SMS or bank authentication login that's friction or challenge, as they say, uh, with customer interaction. Now that can have a little more abandon rate, not as high as most people think, actually. So you all should do some A/B testing. But when the COVID happened, is really when the shift started happening. So
Mhm.
I'm going to use some specific industries here. So people started buying online, but people also got frustrated with things happening with their online purchases. So let's use ticketing, for example. So people got frustrated that the events were postponed and they all started going on the internet where everybody has an opinion now and talking about how to get their money back.
Mhm.
And the word chargeback, call your bank, call your bank, call your credit card company, call you that,
Mhm.
challenge this, challenge that. And people realize that it worked sometimes. Now, I will say I worked at Ticketmaster during the time, and we were really, really good at winning because
Mhm.
we sat there and poured over the card documents from each of the issue or for each of the networks
Mhm.
extensively to
Yep.
make sure that we were representing this information correctly to win. And we had in the 80s. But we still lose some. But people found out that they could make a phone call or not even make a phone call sometimes and get their money back while keeping the item. Because a lot of like even if you had gone like Amazon was real drove this a lot, where you could go on and say, "Hey, this product is broken. It's not quite what I expected." They'd be like, "Keep it. We'll refund your money." They it was people were scared of the sickness. Who's touched it? What's it going to come back like? What's going on? Keep it. Keep your money. So then also people started ordering multiple sizes of shirts to figure out which one fit, and then just wanting to return them.
Mhm.
And then they found out that like all of a sudden people stopped accepting 8 different sizes of shirts returns unless they pay for it back. So they're just like charge it back. So for whatever reason, to your point, people started disassociating themselves from now you have 7 shirts that you meant to return, but now you're just charging back. You're calling your bank and charging back, get your money back because they won't take them back without you paying $5 to ship it back. They disassociated that action from walking into a store,
Yep.
stealing 7 shirts off the rack and walking out the door without paying. For whatever reason, mentally in their mind, because they're not physically in a store, there's a difference there. So people that think that they're a good person, I would never steal. The same people that are on Facebook every single day talking about organized retail crime are the ones calling their bank and charging back while saying, California, you're letting them get away with this. Well, you're doing the same thing. You're not any better than those people because you're doing the same thing. So I don't know what the psychological disconnect is, but it's been a problem. So before I move on to the next part, thoughts and opinions there.
I think you did a really good job of getting to, like, the core of what like, how to define a friendly fraud. I think that that's something that can be kind of challenging because it is kind of this, like, moral gray area for whatever reason.
Yep.
Like you said, it is
Exactly
like,
the words I
ultimately,
used
it
to
is
use
the
too.
same as stealing from a retail store, but I think because kind of, like, the broader perception of what is actually taking place isn't that, um and it's not necessarily something that, like, you can be prosecuted for the most
Yeah.
part, as
You're
far as
not.
I know, like, unless it's an extreme case, right? Um, like, I think people who are, more prone to doing this kind of feel like, "Well, I did pay for it,"
So
like,
I
initially, and I
I
think
know
that's kind of
somebody.
part of the
Yeah.
justification.
I guess, yeah. So like, I guess they did, but then they get all the money back. I knew someone that used to work in this industry. I still know them. I used to as well, but I still do today. Thank you, Mitch. But they would like not get utensils or something from like
Mhm.
their food delivery, and they would charge back the whole order.
Okay.
Like,
Yep.
so much so like that their food delivery service cut them off from being able to ask for refunds
Wow.
anymore.
Yeah.
So again, it's the same thing. Like you wouldn't go into a restaurant and just like take the food and leave, because like y- you didn't get a fork. Like hopefully
Yeah.
you're getting it delivered. Hopefully you have a fork. But speaking of food delivery specifically, like food delivery chargebacks skyrocketed during COVID
Yeah.
because not only was there like the contactless, which became a big thing, but people found out that like they could deliver to a different address and then say I never got it, or not put their apartment number in and then say they'll leave it
Mhm.
outside and say I never got it. It was never delivered. A lot of like not received claims went up even though they got it.
Mhm.
And you'll see people it's all over Reddit, especially like the DoorDash one and all that, where like people just trying to scam the system and saying like I couldn't afford it anyway. And they're like, well, why are you buying a $30 cheeseburger? But food delivery services like has really rose. And one of the things that's really, really driving the food delivery services, and this is according to like Feed's Eye and some of the other reports that
Mhm.
are out there. So Kier had a really good report too.
Mhm.
But BOPIS, so buy online, pick up in store.
Mm.
So if you go to like McDonald's or you go to Chipotle, for example, is you can buy on the app and pick it up in the store. And
Yep.
there's no dip in the chip, there's no validation. It's on a rack.
Yep.
And you can walk in and just grab a bag, any bag, and walk out. So there's no validation. So what's to stop anybody from
Yeah.
just using a fake card, ordering it, and or using a stolen card, ordering it to the store, and then walking out with the bag? Now,
Mhm.
um, and doing the chargeback. So that's been a rise there, and it's a vector for them. So that's just food delivery services to begin with. But and then also everybody that's like listening to this that maybe on Reddit that says like, oh, you just charge back even if you really bought it. I'll just use a new email or I'll just use a new credit card. Do you really think that we don't know how to tie those accounts together? Do you really think that we don't? Oh, I'll change my IP address. VPNs exist. We're better than that. We are better than that. So go ahead, nuke your Ticketmaster account, nuke your DoorDash account, nuke your Uber account. See what happens when you try and sign up again. So just try it. See what happens, people. We're better than that. We thought about it 20 years ago how to stitch your account together when you switch change your email, your credit card. So anyway, but um, digital delivery specifically, a card network called me a couple of months ago and said, "Hey, we would like to do an episode and talk about some of the misconceptions of friendly fraud specifically."
Mm.
So it used to be that we would think and equate about 30% of our merchant chargebacks that fraud reason coded were friendly fraud. So the person actually participated.
Right.
30%. It's pretty high.
Yep.
Pretty shitty,
Real quick,
honestly.
can I do a quick
Yeah.
clarification? So what I'm thinking you mean by that, so correct me if I'm wrong here, is 30% of all chargebacks that come back specifically with a fraud reason code, like a fraud category code. Is that what you're
Mhm.
saying?
Yes,
Okay,
would be
perfect.
friendly fraud.
Yeah.
That's historically, I would say the last 5, 6 years, that was maybe well, COVID. So maybe go back 7 years.
Yeah.
We would say around 30%. So I would say since 2018, yeah,
Okay.
that's about 6 years. I would say most of it. Now, we've been throwing that number around for a long time, loving that number. Um, but a large network called me and said that number is wrong. And I was like, "Oh god. Here
Mm.
we go. Jordan was wrong," which I sometimes am, not very often. Sometimes am. But they said, "No, that number's in the high 70s." And I
Wow.
was like, "Whoa." So, and we're going to talk about this. We're going to spend some time on this piece right here. But um it's come out in reports since then that yes, that number is true. It's 75 to 76% of all fraud claims,
Yeah.
especially in digital goods. And this is according to, let me make sure
Mm.
I got my source right here. Which one this was? Because I'm not very good at linking this on our notes. I believe it is. Yep, it is from. This is from Mastercard themselves
Mm.
saying, "Sellers beware, getting to the bottom of first-party fraud." It was an article from March 18th, 2024, by Christine Gibson. So on March 18th, 2024, which was when we were probably all at MRC, if I'm not mistaken, this article came out saying 75%, and we're specifically talking about subscriptions and digital goods. So ebooks, online games are first party misuse. 75%. Now, I will say games Doesn't shock me
Not
because
at all.
probably a lot of, I mean, you guys can see some data on your side. Now, we don't want to necessarily use your company's data because this is our own thing outside of your company. But grandma's credit card being used without authorization, in-app purchases, buyer's remorse, those sorts of things. Subscriptions, I will say most likely, if your company is affected by this really high rate, your subscriptions are too hard to cancel, and you need to stop being a dick and let people cancel easier. I just went through that with I bought new internet because I want fiber, and these podcasts take a lot of bandwidth. We record them over the internet, and Spectrum wasn't leading up to it. But the guy at Spectrum, it was like 40 minutes of me telling him no. I was erupting on him. Like I don't yell at people on IVR's customer service a lot because I know they got a lot of shit they got to go through. And I used to work in that field, so I know because I used to be on the receiving end of that shit. That guy sucked, and he should not be doing that because just cancel my damn shit. But that will be a driver. So make it like I understand wanting to have customer retention. You could do a couple of upsells through like a funnel online, and if they don't bite the bullet, they're out. I will say that I had a golf subscription from a company called Short Par 4, and they had an excellent one. I was like, hey, I want to cancel. They offered me a great like proposition to stay. I stayed. And then at the end of that proposition, I did leave. But like funnels work. If funnels work, if you do it right, it doesn't work is frustrating the customer. Because now I will never, ever call Spectrum. And I will tell everybody that I know how difficult it was, including everybody that's listening to the show, how much it sucked to cancel that. Don't ever use Spectrum. Like go any other way. Time Warner for old ass LA people that know, and then I guess Charter too, I think. But so what are your thoughts on that 75% number?
75% isn't surprising to me at all. And when you first dropped that stat on me, my brain immediately went to like digital goods and subscriptions, both from my own experience as a consumer of things, somebody who buys video games, somebody who knows people who play video games, somebody who spends time on Reddit, as well as, what I hear
The
from,
Reddit consumer is a fickle consumer. If they're not 100% satisfied, they feel
yeah,
entitled to a
yeah,
refund every time. Especially
yep.
the gamers. They're like, I played this game for 10 hours. It sucks. Give me my money back. It's like 10 hours, bro. Like, come on.
You haven't even gotten to know her yet, take her out to dinner first at least. Um, what I find really interesting about like I think that one of the primary challenges is the grandma's credit card or the parent's credit card, and it's like their 12-year-old or their teenager,
Mhm.
most likely, purchasing something with like on like Roblox or I don't know, what's the gosh, it's the one that I should know what it is.
Fortnite.
Yeah, that's the one. I'm not a big fan of, battle royale or first person shooter
So
games,
I was
but
like, not to cut like again, but I was with my buddy Casey and his family
uh-huh.
at their house in Havasu a couple weeks back, and their kid was playing Fortnite, one of their sons, and that game is a lot different than when it first came out.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
a lot different. I mean, I'm not gonna play it because I don't wanna, like, throw the controller. I'm a big single player fan.
Yeah,
But,
same.
I was, like, shocked. I was like, "This is Fortnite now?" Like, there's a lot. So,
Yeah,
okay.
there's a lot going on, there's a lot that you can pay for. It's like it's these games that, like, don't seem like a pay to play model, but then
Mhm.
as soon as you do spend the 10 hours or the 20 hours or whatever, your experience, like, you're kind of capped in the type of experience you can have as a player unless you do start to pay to play, right? And these, like, teenagers, also adults, but, like, teenagers who play, um, like, getting a hold of their parents' credit cards or grandma's credit cards to buy these digital products, and then the owner of the credit card is like, "I have no idea what this is even for." Like, that still more or less counts as friendly fraud, and I think that could be really challenging, to manage.
Yeah.
But also the Reddit, like musketeers, I suppose. It's like our freedom fighters. I don't know. There's a word that I'm thinking of that I can't put it's at the tip of my tongue. Um, who, like their whole thing is figuring out how to like n- it's like just pirate the game at that point, but get
Yeah.
around to paying for digital goods. Um, or like I've even seen like TikToks now where people are like, look, I'm gonna go into this store. I placed, the BOPIS thing. And I know that's not necessarily a digital example. Um, will walk into the store, pick up the item that they purchased online, and then literally walk out to their car and, like, file a chargeback with their bank right
Mhm.
there, and then they'll, like, show that the money had been refunded already. So it's like it's so easy for these, like, amateurs basically
Yep.
to commit first party or friendly fraud, whether, like, intentionally or not, right? Insidiously or not, nefariously or not. It's like all you have to do is, like, how to get my money back, or, like, how to get this thing without paying for it, or how to get this thing for $10. Like, that's so
It's
easy to find that information now.
yeah, and, I PayPal's the only one that I can really see the comments of what people are really saying at my company,
Yeah.
of to why they're charging back, and some of the comments are ridiculous. Now, our company does qualify for seller protection, but I
Mm,
will say we don't always get it. And I look at like some of the comments are like, I just don't want it anymore. And then it's like I look over and I see that we responded and then we lost. Like that's not a valid grievance.
yeah.
And then I understand like my business is very global, so it could be expensive to send stuff back. But like if you order all the stuff and you say, I don't want it anymore, and then we say, okay, fine, send it back. And then that's on you, like you knew that that was a possibility. Um, I'm sorry, but like you don't get to just keep $400 worth of stuff because it was $30 to send it back. Like that's just not how
Yeah.
it works. So I think people are wrestling with like how we've come out of COVID. I think if I remember correctly, Zara was like the first major company to start charging again for returns, which still
Mm,
shocked people. Now, I for people that are going to MRC San Diego, I am doing a panel with our director of customer experience and customer service, where we talk about retail, or not retail, but return RMA abuse, which we're
mhm.
not going to get into in this episode. That's a whole other thing. But I will tell everybody listening to this, spoiler alert, um, denying a refund does not equal the amount of chargebacks that you would think it does. It's not
Mhm.
as big of a driver as you think. And I have some numbers that I'm not going to share on this particular episode because I'm going to wait till after. But you can say no to people on refunds. You can, people. You can. It'll be okay. But you will get some, but you
Yeah.
won't get as many as people tried to return.
Mhm.
Um, but I do want to talk about some of my theories is why some of those numbers outside of using grandma's credit card is so high. Are you ready?
I'm
Or do
ready,
you
let's go.
so, Alexander Hall and I did an episode recently about synthetic identities, and we kinda touch on this a little. But I've spoken to a lot more people since then about why I think this 75% might not be the right number. Um,
Oh,
yeah, so, wrench in the spoke of what we just talked
let's
about for the
do it.
last 15 minutes. So, sophistication of ATOs
Mm.
is a driver. So,
Yes.
the ability for people to ATO an account and make it look as if it's the actual card holder
Mhm.
participating is higher than ever. So, using the correct IP, using the correct address, using the correct credential, and but really the person has no idea that this is
Yep.
happening to them is a thing now. And
Yeah.
also the same thing with synthetic identities and creating an identity that appears to be legitimate, appears to live at that house, appears to have that real card, and then be issuing a fraud chargeback is better than ever now.
Agreed. That's such a good point. I'm so glad you brought that up. Wow.
So I think that some of the 75%, well, I think a lot of it is real people doing it. I
Right.
think some of it is actual fraudsters faking that they're a real
Certainly.
consumer.
Certainly.
So thoughts and opinions, because you already said you agree. So what do you think?
Yeah, this is, like, adjacent to that, like, fraud as a service thing that I
100%.
where it's like they are leveraging, like, real people's information to commit fraud so that it looks like first party fraud, which I think as kind of we've alluded to is really difficult to what's the word? Like, those types of chargebacks in those scenarios are really difficult to win with the banks for a lot of different reasons, which I don't know if we wanna get into that or not, but, like, there's a lot of factors that go into it, certainly, but did you have a
Yeah.
thought there?
I mean, yeah. So, I mean, I think that, with compelling evidence 3.0, they've
Mm,
tried to work it a little bit.
yeah.
I don't necessarily know. I think that as because the limits are pretty public, where like transaction has to be like older than 100 and I think it's 120 days, but less than a year.
Mhm.
Um, so I think as those since those are so public, that people will start to make their purchases, their first party fraud purchases, because they don't have one account. They have like
Right.
100 that they're
Yes.
doing this.
Yes.
And they can set these limits on these things to be outside of that.
Mhm.
So the person doesn't win. But I think it's going to be, with the same stuff that's happening with the pig butchering, with Congress and scams and Zelle payments and all of those, where this is where I could say we come back from what we were talking about earlier, um, is the issuers being requested to hold the bag. And when they know that this legislation is coming, they've been trying to send those emails, education, which we
Yes.
said last year and earlier this year that education was going to be a big piece, is educating consumer about, hey, these are scams that exist. But to, I hate to play the devil's advocate on this, is because like we can educate the consumer so much to not do something. But if they go through all those things, like, at what point can they say, "Hey, I didn't know," even though they went through 6 hurdles that said, "Please don't do this. You're getting scammed. Please don't do this. Hey, we're gonna make it really hard for you to actually send that money, but you did it anyway." To where
Yeah.
like, what point does a consumer have to be responsible? And they lose those rights in order to issue any sort of dispute or any sort of recovery claim because they actually willingly did. Like, I think that, like, that's where for these chargebacks where people are willingly participating and it can be proven
Yep.
even through our chargeback process they did, there needs to be repercussions
Mhm.
outside
Mhm.
of they just got rebuilt.
Mhm.
Like, there really does need to be, and I think that that's where Congress is focusing so much on making the banks liable for it, but we need to also be looking to the consumer, because when the consumer actually has skin in the game outside of just maybe $20 is when we're going to see the underlying behavior change. If the
Mhm.
consumer could potentially be facing not only their $20 back, but a fine, a ticket, a citation, jail time, those sorts of things. And I doubt that the jails are going to want to fill up the jails with a whole bunch of people that issue chargebacks for 7 t-shirts.
Yeah.
I doubt that. But there needs to be, maybe the credit card company needs to shut them down. Maybe the rights to have a credit card needs to be revoked for a certain amount of time. I don't know. I'm just spitballing here. But we need to come. I think that's where the legislation needs to be, is like, not only do the banks need to police their consumer, which what they're going to do that is slow down the payments and slow down the things that like savvy consumers like, in order to protect the
Yeah.
few. Um, but the merchants also need to stop having to be the ones that hold the bag all the time for this behavior.
Certainly.
The
Yeah, there's only
consumer
so much
does
that
have
as the
to.
merchant you can do, I think, to protect yourselves from that type of activity, to protect yourself from those types of losses without starting to impact every other customer that comes to your
Mhm.
website, like, and it's not fair that you're the one who has to, like, hold that line and, like, choose where to, like, sacrifice, like, which parts of the experience do you have to sacrifice? Where do I need to set limits? Where do I need to hold boundaries? I'm using therapy speak here, but, like, that's literally how I think about it.
Yeah, and I think that, like, that's what we're gonna see is like especially with Congress, like the banks, there was a 50-50 split that's coming in October for like Zelle payments, RTP, real-time payments,
Mm,
faster payments,
yep.
the Fed now, all that. But like, especially with pig butchering being such a thing, Aaron West put up a great article about this the other day, which was like the scam thing where a lady shared her story with the local news about being scammed.
Mm,
And she was vulnerable, and I like Aaron's take on it. It was done really well. Um, where the lady shared her story to basically to warn others about how this could happen. And everybody just roasted the lady in the comments. How could you be so dumb? Like, what are you thinking? You send $58,000 or 48,000 with some crazy sum of money to a person you've never met, blah, blah, blah. But it's not old ladies that are falling for this. It's Gen Z mostly that's falling for it because they're very trusting of everything they read on the internet. But it's there. I'm not trying to say, how could you be so dumb? I'm trying to say is like, we need to have some sort of personal accountability.
well, maybe we can think about it this way, like, so there are scenarios, I think, like Aaron's
Hear me
story,
out
where, um,
here.
it's like, "What were you thinking genuinely?" But I think that there are a lot of other stories, whether it's old ladies or your grandparents or kids in their early 20s who just like, again, like you said, are really trusting of everything they see online. And they're so used to interacting and exchanging information online that they just don't really think much of it. Um, like I think what I want to say is that I agree with your take that like there should be repercussions. But what about those folks who just like it's like we as people who are incredible I would say that people within like the millennial Gen X kind of category or
Mhm.
people who work in technology in general are a lot more like internet savvy. They have a lot more like internet literacy and
Yeah.
like virtual interaction literacy because I like folks like myself and you, like we grew up with technology. Like we aged as technology aged and developed. So like we saw early stage dial up, hearing the screeches in our ears waiting to connect to the internet kind of thing. We saw the first iPhones, we saw the first like MP3 players, and now we have all of this amazing technology at our fingertips. Everything's seamless, everything's instant, right? Like so for folks who don't have that level of media literacy, like what's kind of like the middle ground between like these hard heavy like repercussions or like punishments really that's what it is. Like okay, you did this, dumb thing or you fell for this scam even though we warned you, so now you can't process like you can't use our credit card or you can't
Yeah.
like maybe you get a fine. What's the middle ground between that and just putting it all on the merchant?
Yeah, and that's where and then I think, the banks also don't wanna be like, "You can't put it all on us too,"
Yeah,
you know? And I understand that point of view, but, like, when I've worked at, like and when I worked in ticketing, like, we monitored how many tickets
right.
went to certain accounts, like, they can monitor the kinds of money going to certain accounts,
Mhm.
or maybe there needs to be legislation about how much money can be sent to an account via those channels over a
Yeah.
certain day, but then people just move to wires, like,
Mhm.
there's always if and thens, but, I don't know. I mean, I'm not here to try and solve it today because
Yeah.
even scamming wasn't where we originally started with this. We want to talk just about friendly fraud and how that sucks. But
Yeah.
again, I think that like friendly fraud and chargebacks there needs to be more consumer
Yeah.
penalty.
So, like what do you think? I'm you the we just moved to wires like that. My like a scenario kind of unfolded in my head in a couple of different ways. It's
Sure.
like so we have the Gen Z, the Gen Alpha, the younger folks who probably don't even know what that means yet, right? Like they've never had
So
to
they buy a
wire.
house, which they never will.
Oh, I hope they can. Like
I hope they can too, but like
thoughts and prayers, y'all. Um,
I bought my first one at 39 and like
yeah.
the price was astronomical.
We got really lucky to get into the market when we did. Otherwise, I think we wouldn't have. Um, m- but if it's we'll move to wires when you want to send money over a certain threshold. Like, would that reduce the number of like younger people that are falling for these sorts of
So
scams? Would it increase? Like, would they look like? Would there be like how or how would you potentially see these scams evolving if something like that was put into place?
so I think I'm gonna come back to passkeys because I think they're the shit. Biometric authentication. I think that we might need to find a way to say if you biometrically authenticate with your
Mhm.
face, with your thumb, with your eyeball,
Yep.
whatever it may be, that the onus becomes on you. Now, I think that you can put that same justification on the receiver side. So the receiving account needs to be biometrically authenticated too, so they know exactly
Mhm.
who is receiving. So if there's
Yeah.
any sort of dispute that arises, they know directly who the person is that they can go to. Now,
Mhm.
I'm not going to pretend to sort all this out today
Yeah.
because that's just not what we're here to do.
We're
Like,
just
I'm not
we're
here to
just
solve this.
postulating,
I'm going to have
theorizing.
a lot of other people smarter than me can try and figure out how to put these sorts of things.
Mhm.
But I think that, like, that's where we're really going to unlock some real situations is if something is biometrically authenticated in the future, there needs to be a
Yeah.
liability shift back to the consumer.
Right.
So there basically can't be a claim of fraud because you were
Yeah.
known to be there.
Yeah.
Um, so that's my like opinion, man, about now how that'll have to be for like customer service disputes will have to be what figure somebody have to figure that out because what'll happen is you'll just see a bunch of shifts from fraud into it was broken. I didn't like it, all
Right.
that sort of
Item
stuff
not
is
as
where it'll show.
described as a
Yeah.
reason code I see a lot of folks struggling with.
And, like, then it'll have to probably be, like, photos going out with,
Yeah.
like, where of, like, "Here it is in the box," and then they have a photo of it all broken, which you'll see, like, there was a great video I watched on Newegg where, like, they Newegg was just, like, replying to, like, RMA requests with, like, the same broken photo,
Mhm.
like, over and over just to
Hey,
say, "Yeah, we're not giving you your money back," that
real
sort of thing.
quick, um, can you define RMA real quick for folks who
Oh,
don't know that acronym?
return authorization.
Okay, perfect.
So,
Thank
basically,
you.
when you call the company and you say, "I need to send it
Yeah.
back," they
Yeah.
issue an RMA code, so it's a authorization. Usually, you have to put either a slip in the box
Yeah.
or, you write on the outside of the box so they know this is the return to assign it to this account.
Okay.
That
And I'm
sort of
not gonna pretend I knew that acronym, but I also wanted you to define it for folks who might not also, because the longer I'm in this industry, the more acronyms I realize I
Yeah.
don't know.
Everybody has their own version of
Yeah,
the
yeah.
acronyms
Like,
too.
for insufficient funds decline codes, for example, I hear INF and NSF,
Yeah.
and if you use the one that the other person doesn't use, no one knows what each other is talking about. So, thank you for defining that for us.
Yeah, geez, I'm getting so many emails right now.
Well,
It's just,
stop
like,
looking at your
binging.
email.
I'm not looking at it, it's just bings in my ear because I got the in-ears, so I can
Oh,
hear everything.
turn off your
Um,
notifications.
well, then I have to reconfigure my whole machine
Okay,
for
let me
this
show you what
1
my home
hour of my
screen
day.
looks like real quick, and we can leave this in. I don't really care.
No, totally. Look at how, nice and pink that is.
It's
I
so I don't see notifications
oh,
because I can't.
mm,
It derails my train of thought. It like interrupts my flow. I can't
well,
see any notifications when I'm
so
working.
here's mine, and here's in the last 10 seconds, 5 emails have come in.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
crazy. Popular man. Or
Yeah,
man.
you know me. Look, I got a reputation to uphold here.
So I wanna like follow that thread of the authentication piece. I find it really interesting that there seems to be this push in the US specifically for stricter like repercussions for the consumer before we've ever like gotten to the point before ever getting to the point of
No, it's
rolling something out like PSD2 or 3
well, I
like
see it to be, like, stricter protections
yeah,
for the consumer.
stricter protections where the implications are stronger. Like, I feel like we're kind of skipping a step maybe, and maybe
I
I'm just
agree.
missing something in, like, the happenings and the, like, where they're at with actually rolling out this legislation, but by rolling out something similar to what, the European Union has with PSD2 requiring 3DS on every digital purchase, like, I feel like that could eliminate or at least alleviate a lot of this pressure.
I
What do you
agree.
think
So I
about that?
agree, but American consumers are super
Right.
shitty to adopt technology, and, because you know what's so weird is, like, we see a lot of abandon rate in, 3D Secure because people think that they're being scammed. They think, like, the overlay or whatever it may
Yeah, 'cause it
be
is
them
just a
being scammed,
challenge window, isn't it?
especially the
Mm,
older ones, you know?
yeah.
But those are the same people that'll send, $48,000 to Keanu Reeves because he just sent him a text
Yeah,
message with a heart emoji in it, you know? So,
I
like,
wish.
it's such a weird thing, but, like, I will say, we're gonna have to wrap this up because we're starting to go a little long here,
Oh,
and we're starting to get off our topic. But I will say, historically, even recently, when I've done 3D Secure, implementations, I do allow, a certain amount of bypass,
yeah,
and I rarely get coverage over the high 70%.
yeah,
The rest of, like, the 22% of
mhm,
customers are usually closing out on trying to bypass the actual prompt.
yeah,
So we have to put additional scrutiny on those particular accounts, but we just don't see a whole lot of adoption, and I can't afford to shave off
yeah,
22% of my
yeah, so it
orders,
is
by
it's still a
forcing it.
consumer issue. That makes sense.
And I think that I think there needs to be more education around that. And I also think that banks and issuers in the US need to better adopt a frictionless experience because
Yes,
some of them are still using super legacy rails, so much so that you still see old bank logos sometimes on the
yeah,
pop-ups. So,
yeah.
yeah. And then with like SIM swapping and stuff, SMS is kind of outdated. So, it's probably time to fully embrace a frictionless experience for everybody. Um, yeah,
I don't
just
disagree.
so I think that's what we're gonna call time for today. Our long walk through the woods on fraud. So you didn't get any fraud last week, everybody, but you got so much fraud this week. So I hope we made up for it a little bit. All right, everybody. Well, we'll say goodbye, and yeah, we'll see you.
Toodaloo.
We'll see you soon.